And for today's NBA playoff recap, as we saw last night, obviously the Boston Celtics, they took care of the Miami Heat. They are now awaiting the winner of the Orlando Cleveland series, which many people in the national media have obviously barely touched. Because that series has been buried on NBA TV, and it's the Orlando Magic. And even though they have a bunch of young players, including a budding superstar in Pablo Banchero, and even though the Cleveland Cavaliers have some nice pieces in Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, who of course did miss Game Five. Outside of Game Five, which came down to the wire, that series has been very boring. As I mentioned in that series, as a hometown Cleveland Cavalier fan, I have obviously watched every dribble of that series. And while the Cavs did dominate most of Game One and Game Two, I talked about that series, last week, and I had said I did not like the way the Cavs closed either of those first two games. And contrary to what many people in the Cleveland market believe, I thought the series was going seven after game one, after my original prediction was Cavs in six. Orlando came back game three and four, stomped Cleveland, gave themselves confidence, and then game five without Jarrett Allen, Orlando dominated on the boards. If it wasn't for a clutch block by Evan Mobley on Franz Wagner, Orlando could be up 3-2 right now instead of Cleveland. It'd be very interesting to see how a young Orlando team, who seems to be growing up right before our very eyes, responds in game six. Well, the Cavs are very Donovan Mitchell dependent. Now, Orlando is obviously very Pablo Banchero dependent, but at home, their stars are making their shots. Even at home in game five for Cleveland, outside of Max Strus going off for about 3 or 4 minutes and Darius Garland having a good, first half, it took everybody and everything for the Cavs to only beat Orlando by one. What that tells me is the winner of this series will probably get destroyed by Boston, even without Kristaps Porzingis. Again, I think the Knicks are the real only challenger to Boston, which is the next series that I want to get to. Of course, the incredible game five between the Knicks and the Sixers that also took place on Tuesday night. What a magical night Tuesday night was in the NBA, contrary to last night. As I said, I feel like these NBA playoffs have mostly been dull. A lot of people have said, "Oh, we've gotten some great games," and we have. Most of them, unfortunately, have come on the West Coast, which sucks for us East Coast people that had to be up till 12:30 in the morning watching these early first round playoff games. And I do think that that does diminish the value for me because I'm just ready to go to bed at that point so that I can start my day job the next morning. But obviously Lakers Nuggets had a great game. Clippers Mavs had a great game four. Oklahoma City New Orleans had some moments, though not really a lot of drama because we know New Orleans is not going to win the series. Same thing with Minnesota Phoenix. Minnesota obviously completely took apart Phoenix. I think really Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers in that five-game series was very entertaining throughout, as I think this Sixers Knicks series has been very entertaining throughout. Tyrese Maxey with the incredible 7 points, the free ball, and then obviously the 4-point play to send the game into overtime with Joel Embiid looking like Andre the Giant out there limping around. He is clearly not right. Now, the next, Josh Hart is obviously a great effort guy. Isaiah Harvenstein is clearly a great effort guy. So is Mitchell Robinson. Dante DiVincenzo can make some shots, but this team is very Jalen Brunson dependent. Now, it's likely that Indiana gets past Milwaukee. I really don't even want to talk about that series because it's not even much of a series. I mean, Chris Middleton rose and shone in game five at home. The role players played well, and it was an embarrassing loss for Indiana as without Dame, without Giannis, Milwaukee won that game. And interestingly, I felt like Milwaukee should have won game three in Indiana. Middleton came back with some clutch shots late. They obviously just couldn't finish the deal, and Miles Turner made some key rebounds in that game. But Indiana nor Milwaukee has not impressed me. I think either of those teams are get beat by the Knicks or even the Sixers if the Sixers do somehow come back from 3-1. Which I think winning a game seven in MSG would be very tough. And I actually think history says in recent Philadelphia sports that the Knicks are going to win game six tonight just because it would be so Philadelphia sports. Obviously, the Phillies blowing the World Series and then the next year losing to Arizona. Philadelphia blowing the Super Bowl, and then the next year collapsing in the regular season, losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL wildcard round. How about the Sixers with an incredible overtime win in game 5 of the first round against the Knicks, and then be bounced by the Knicks in game 6 on your home floor? It sounds like such a Sixers thing to do. I would pick Indiana in whatever matchup they get, Milwaukee or Indiana. And I think we're going to get Knicks Celtics Eastern Conference Finals. And again, I do feel like Dallas now is going to just take down the Clippers. I mean, Paul George and James Harden had a historic start. Then Dallas came back from 31, gave them all the confidence in the world. And obviously, last night, and we said this, this series really came down to Kawhi Leonard. If he was healthy throughout the series, which I thought he was going to be after game 1, clearly he was not. I picked the Clippers. And I said if he was not healthy for the series, I would pick Dallas, and that's what has turned out. And I'm going to pick Dallas over Oklahoma City because I think Dallas would have the best player in the series. And I think we're going to get a Dallas Denver Western Conference Finals. With that being said, I think it is time. And, I talked about this the other day when we talked about the changing of the guard in the NBA. LeBron out of the playoffs, Steph out of the playoffs, Kevin Durant now out of the playoffs. We assume very soon Kawhi Leonard will be out of the playoffs. We assume very soon Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard are out of the playoffs. And if that is the case, the oldest star in the NBA playoffs is 32-year-old Kyrie Irving, who obviously 8 years ago at the age of 24 made potentially one of the greatest next to the Ray Allen 2013 corner three shot in NBA history to win the Cleveland Cavaliers their only championship in franchise history. So it just shows the changing in the guard in the National Basketball Association. But I think it's time for teams like Phoenix to have a conversation about Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. I never thought the Bradley Beal deal would work as much as you can't depend on Chris Paul's health, who's another one who obviously is out of the postseason right now. Thanks to him being a part of the Warriors. I always thought Chris Paul was the glue that kept that Suns team together ever since they went on their original run in 2021. I defended going after Durant, though I didn't think it was going to be this massive game changer, but I said it put a lot of pressure on Phoenix to win the championship within the next 2 years, and the experiment has clearly died. I think it's up to the Lakers, to take a look at, okay, we have LeBron and AD, they play very well. Austin Reeves is a very nice player, but D'Angelo Russell is inconsistent. We don't have a ton of draft picks. We want to get Bronny James, the Lakers, to prioritize keeping LeBron, who is a free agent. And for the record, this time I do think LeBron will re-sign with the Lakers and stay in LA for the rest of his career. I think it makes basketball and business sense. I think the only team he'd probably move for is the Knicks, which I don't know if he wants to take the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands, and I don't know if he wants to be coached by a hard-nosed defensive-minded coach like that in Thibodeau. So I think the Lakers have to look at themselves in the mirrors and see how they can reconstruct their roster with basically LeBron, AD, and almost all 3-point shooters. Maybe you get some rim protection on the backside of that, but I think they really need to look at, a bunch of shot makers and a bunch of shot marksmen essentially for that Lakers team. I think it's time for the Clippers. We talked about this last year. Kawhi Leonard cannot stay healthy. Paul George this year is healthy, but his history says he cannot stay healthy. James Harden's history in the playoffs is not great. Russell Westbrook's history in the playoffs is not great. James Harden and Russell Westbrook combined ever since being in Oklahoma City with Kevin Durant have a combined 0 NBA Finals appearances. And it's funny to me that Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, all 3 of them, could be available. Could they get the band back together? Who knows? Um, but I think it's time for those teams, right, to look in the mirror. Clippers, Suns, Lakers. Do we trade our stars? Do we reboot? Do we try to retool the roster? Very interesting summer for those teams. I also think if Philadelphia loses this series, like I do think they probably will tonight, I think it is time for them to look at trading Joel Embiid and starting over. And I defended Joel Embiid for years and years and years. I defended him 2 years ago or excuse me, I defended him last year when I thought he or yeah, 2 years ago, excuse me, I'm getting it mixed up. He won the MVP last year. I thought Jokic was the better player. 2 years ago, I thought Joel Embiid was the better player, and they gave it to Jokic. I always thought Joel Embiid was more athletic and a better shooter than Jokic. Clearly, Jokic proved me wrong last year in the postseason. But Joel Embiid cannot stay healthy. You can really only count on him for half of the regular season. We know Tyrese Maxey is a number two. He's not a number one. Maybe he's developed that number one here over the course of this 5 game series so far. Who knows? He certainly made some clutch shots, but I don't think you can depend on Tyrese Maxey, and they have no other reliable scorers on their team. Buddy Hield has had a bad series. Kelly Oubre has essentially disappeared. Tobias Harris is whatever. So Philadelphia's roster isn't great. I think it's time for them to take a look at exploring trading Joel Embiid and starting over as well. And then for Cleveland, if they lose to Orlando, we already know JB Bickerstaff, who is the worst head coach in the history of the NBA. He's the worst head coach in the history of Cleveland sports, and that's not a hyperbole when you have Hugh Jackson and Freddie Kitchens on your resume as head coaches of the Cleveland Browns. No adjustments, constantly screaming at the refs, constantly blaming everyone. Team clearly not listening to him throughout the season. Do the Cavs, because even though Donovan Mitchell says he grew up a Cleveland fan and all of this, do the Knicks try to go after Donovan Mitchell? Do the Cavs try to trade Darius Garland? There's a rumor out there they could try to trade Evan Mobley. They don't want to trade Donovan Mitchell, but with only 1 year left on his contract, if Mitchell makes it clear Cleveland's not meeting his expectations, to be honest with you, would explore trading Donovan Mitchell and seeing if I could get a haul, particularly with wings, because that's what the Cavs need. I think you could have a Darius Garland, a Max Strus at the two, and get a real wing. I've always said Paul George to me would be a realistic target. Obviously, I don't think LeBron is coming back to Cleveland. Now, if I don't have to give up everything in the world, I would think about a Kevin Durant target. Because I think Durant's one of the best go get a bucket guys in the league, and I don't think he's a great leader. Like Kawhi Leonard, I think he's a follower, and I think that Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen could lead that team instead of Kevin Durant. So these teams, Cleveland, Philly, Clippers, Lakers, Suns have a lot to discuss here. Almost all of them, besides maybe Cleveland and Philly, are going home. I would be shocked. Like I said, if the Clippers come back, and I love the Clippers. I think they're a really good team, but without Kawhi Leonard, I don't think they're better than Dallas. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason in the NBA, is my biggest takeaway so far from these playoffs. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander against Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic against Anthony Edwards. Those are your main attractions in the West. Out East, it's going to be Jason Tatum and crew against either Pablo Banchero or Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs. And then it will probably be Jalen Brunson against Tyrese Halliburton in the East. Again, as we mentioned, hopefully we get some good competitive games. I do think the conference finals will be great. I'm not sure about that second round. Indiana and New York does nothing for me. And like I said, Boston probably annihilate Cleveland. The West, we could get some good series. We'll see if Oklahoma City, excuse me, and Dallas can put on a good series if Shea and Shaq can stick with Luka and Kyrie. But with that being said, yeah, this is sort of the state of the NBA playoffs is where I'm at. I think it's been an okay playoff with some great games. But I'm actually more excited, I believe, about the NBA offseason than I am about the end of the NBA playoffs here, because as I've said constantly, in a 7 game series, nobody is beating the Denver Nuggets. Like that clip from the Brand Sports Podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brand Sports Podcast right here on YouTube.